Instead of the people hiring the government, who then hire the police, the people are directly hiring the Canadian Common Corps of Peace officers in order to hold these people accountable to the law. Now, if the people in the police and the government, if they're not doing anything wrong, they've got nothing to worry about. If they have not been breaking the Criminal Code of Canada, they've got nothing to concern themselves with. They should want to be a member of the Canadian Common Corps of Peace officers. If, however, this Corps of Peace officers is to them a threat, then it must be that they know that in their monopoly they have been engaging in unlawful acts. I'm going to show you something that's a little bit kind of scary. In many jurisdictions, the power to prosecute these statutes are not handled directly by the federal government. They are contracted out to different lawyers and legal companies. So you have lawyers who are acting as the prosecutor under contract to the federal government to enforce things like not the Criminal Code, but the Income Tax Act, Controlled Drug Substance Act, and all these things. And yet the same organization will provide a criminal defense to people if they're charged with criminal code offenses. But these people aren't empowered to bring criminal code prosecution. Now there's a problem with that. Time for a new diagram. You want to know what's coming? Let me explain it to you. Imagine a house. The parents go away for the night. They hire a babysitter. Good babysitter. But she makes a mistake, throws a party, and lets some thugs come into the home. They end up kidnapping her, tying her down, and start abusing the kids. Now one of the kids gets to the phone, calls 911, and the real police come. At this point, the thugs who are acting as the babysitters are just going to be thinking that they're the babysitters, they have all the power. They're going to find out they don't. And then the police are going to want to talk to the people being babysat. And you're going to find a bunch of adults who have been tied to their beds and force-fed pablum, and they're angry. And when the real police cut them free, the thugs who have hijacked this, they're going to be in for a world of hurt. This is our country, and it does not belong to the people who are either operating the government, who are in contract with the government to provide prosecution for the statutes, nor does it belong to the courts, nor does it belong to the police officers. It belongs to the people of Canada, and that's what the Canadian Common Corps of Peace officers is going to ensure remains the case. I could have said that better, but you got the gist. Okay, let's look at exactly what the problem is. Now there's a bunch of people. This line right here, this represents law. If you step outside of this line, you're operating unlawfully. If you're operating inside, you're operating lawfully. Now you got all these different groups. P1, that represents the people of Canada, specifically those who have consented to being governed by them. These are people who are in association with the people in the government. Now the people in the government, they create rules which are supposed to be, well, they don't really create the law, but they create the rules for the people who have consented to being governed, and they're supposed to provide them with benefits in return. When those people break the rules that the government creates, the government gets to take them to court for breaking those rules, essentially because there's a contractual relationship there, and then the government, or the courts, then punish them. This was all taken care of and overseen by the police because the government would contract with the police to enforce their rules, as well as ensure everyone was operating within the bounds of the law. Now the problem is now, if any of these people, what happens now is the government, through the federal prosecution services, hires private law firms to act as their agents and to enforce these rules that are existing here. But we see there's another group of people operating within this lawful boundary. That's a free man on the land, someone who has revoked consent to be governed. Now, if you look at the rules that the government makes, they must operate within the bounds of the law. Now, if any of these people, if the people in the government, the people in these private prosecution law firms, the people in the police departments, or the people in the courts, if any one of them start finding that there is abundance in generating conflict or in enforcing rules outside of this boundary, then these people are screwed. The problem we have is that we have people like Douglas Shatford who make a lot of money by merely acting as agents, and that's what they'll, I'm just an agent for the federal government, and yet what will refuse to examine is that the people in the federal government actually require the consent of the people that they're governing, and that it is entirely lawful for a free man on the land to exist without being governed by the federal statutes that he makes a lot of money enforcing and prosecuting. So what he ends up doing is he tells the police, go get this guy, bring him back in, and we'll bring him into court. Now, once in there, you're operating within this boundary, and the moment you do that, the court just says, oh, well, you're here now. And you're then stuck under the assumption that you have consented to being governed, and yet all of these people, the people in the government, who might just be sitting back doing nothing, but with that doing of nothing, they maintain their control. The private prosecution law firms, such as Creighton Shatford, they end up making loads of money. The police, they end up getting overtime, getting to go to court. They end up getting to claim, oh, we need more and better equipment, and they get to militarize themselves. And the courts, well, they make money regardless of whether or not you're found guilty or not. They make money just operating the machine. They don't care who the hell gets fed into the front of it or what comes out the back. The problem with all of this, what I see, is in fact the private prosecution. Giving the prosecution of federal statutes over to law firms, which are private companies, and giving them a profit motive. They'll get paid regardless of whether or not they're successful in their prosecution, but they do not get paid if there is no prosecution. They have a huge financial incentive to operate unlawfully, to abandon trust, and to order these peace officers to exit equity, grab that which exists only in law, drag it back into equity, and impose federal statutes upon them. And then all of these people, the government, oh, they have plausible deniability. The police, they have plausible deniability. They're just doing what the agent for the federal government, who's a lawyer and should know better, told them to do. And the courts, well, they're just doing their best, aren't they? No, it's the private lawyers who earn money from enforcing statutes, federal statutes, upon the non-consenting. Those are the people I think are criminals, and they need to be dealt with. So how do we do this? The cops aren't going to do it. They're making money off of this. The courts aren't going to do it. They're making a lot of money off of it. And the government, they're not going to do it either. This is where the definition of a peace officer in the Criminal Code of Canada will save us, because anyone in this group and anyone in this group can hire each other to form a group, a new group, called the Canadian Common Corps of Peace Officers, or 3CPO, and we can hold all of these people, the people in the government, the people in the private law firms, the people in the police departments, and the people in the courts, we can ensure that they are all held liable to the law that we are all bound by. At that point, they lose their ability to exit equity, latch onto that which exists only at law, drag it into equity, and then enforce the equity rules upon us. It becomes extraordinarily difficult for them then, doesn't it? And since we can hire each other to preserve and maintain the public peace, and we outnumber them easily 900 to 1, well, the remedy starts becoming rather obvious, doesn't it? and I'll explain that part next.